We're going to introduce a new segment to the show today, the metrics that matter most, brought to us by Practice by Numbers. I'm sure that everyone has heard someone say doctors are the worst business managers. That may be the case for some dentists, but it doesn't have to be the case for you. Successful dental practices consistently monitor and seek to improve a few key metrics. Practice by Numbers dashboard analytics software provides a simple way for you to track and improve the metrics that matter the most. Today, we are looking at the percentage of perio patients. Current medical wisdom tells us that this metric is important to the health of your patients and your practice. Periodontal disease is linked to at least 8 major systemic diseases and is prevalent in about 50% of the population. For this reason, when we see a practice that only has 15 to 20% perio patients, we know that this is a great opportunity for the practice to increase revenue. This is productivity that can be added without the dentist lifting a finger. When we share with the hygienists that their percentage of patients with perio disease is unusually low, we typically find that they have been doing a lot of bloody prophies. Many times, a small investment in a good perio update is all it takes to get back on track. We like to set up a custom dashboard for hygienists so they can log in and track their progress. They can instantly see how many perio procedures they are doing and work towards properly treating and charging for perio procedures. A healthy goal in a typical dental practice would be that the percentage of perio patients is between 30 and 35%. Higher if your demographic includes many seniors, and of course lower if you have a big pediatric presence in the office. To learn more about using smart data to manage your business, visit practicebynumbers.com. All right, I am here with our newest partner at Shared Practices, Dr. Matt Guarino, and I'm very excited to talk about what we're doing today. We're launching a new segment of the show, Practice Underwater, and you know Matt's new in his podcasting journey, and so he's trying to get used to things, and he's giving me a hard time before we get on air here. So we're just going to have a good time and talk about what we're going to be doing at Shared Practices. How's it going, Matt?
It's going good, George. Thanks for that intro. You know, I'm new to the game. I feel like I'm the new kid in school, just got invited to the cool table. Like podcasting is what all the cool kids are doing these days. So I'm jacked up. I didn't sit at the cool table when I was growing up, and now I am. So it's like a whole new world for me.
So we're really excited for this segment called Practice Underwater, because I think one big thing that we hear a lot when we talk to people is, why do you always show people who are successful? You know, we want to learn from everybody regardless of their level of success. And I think one of the big reasons, as somebody who's tried to get unsuccessful people on air, is nobody wants to brag about how they're not successful, or they don't want to talk about their difficulties on air. So we have this really, really cool concept where we are going to talk to a lot of different practice owners and look at their metrics and help them get to where they want to be, but everybody is going to be anonymous. So whether you're doing well, whether you're not, we are not going to allow anybody's identity to be identified. And so that's one of the things I'm most excited about. So Matt, tell us a little bit about Practice Underwater.
Well, you know, as dentists, as dentists and owners, a lot of times we're practicing alone. You know, we don't know the struggles other people are going. We're just kind of knowing what we're going through. And one of the great things about this podcast is going to be able to normalize some of those issues that dentists around the country are facing. You know, we have certain things like Facebook groups where dentists are able to share certain things, but there's no real forum for them to share their whole picture about their practice, what they're struggling with, you know, where they're falling short, where they want to go, you know, what the vision is for the practice, and then getting some guidance on how to get there. And that's just something that isn't existent in this dental world right now, and it is super beneficial for people to hear for themselves, for coming on the podcast, and to hear other people's stories, just to know how many similarities they're going to see in their own practices on the practices they hear on this podcast.
And one of my big beefs with just this kind of whole space that we're in is the lack of authenticity and honesty. And so for us, I think Richard and I, you know, a long time ago, we made a pact to each other that no matter what happens, we're going to be honest. And I think that really I hope that really comes through to our audience, that, you know, we don't always come on here and say we're killing it. We come on here and tell the truth. And if that means we're killing it, then great. If it doesn't, then so what? But I think that we want that to be our identity. And I think we want to transfer that and really help people by being honest about the difficulties, the struggles, and then be honest about the ways to get through it and what's possible.
Yeah. And I think unfortunately, one of the unintended consequences of the Shared Practices podcast is you're hearing a lot from successful people, and it can create some feelings of inadequacy in yourself. If you're just a listener, if you're not doing as well as the person you're listening to, and you're kind of beating yourself up about that. I know I went through that a lot going through dental school and residency and listening even to your podcast and others that, I just felt down about my own situation. And that's not the desired intent, but it is something that could happen. And something with this podcast that's unique is we're going to be talking about struggles. A lot of the podcast is going to be, how are you struggling? What is going wrong? And it's just very valuable for people to hear other people going through that and learn for themselves.
So for people who are wondering what we're going to be doing, we are going to be taking people who we're going to be taking kind of, I guess, a Dave Ramsey type thing where we take callers, but they're going to be a lot longer of calls. So think about 2 episodes worth per individual per practice. And we're going to talk about what's going on in their office and what they want from their office and how they can get there. And that's really our whole goal, is to help people and to help you all realize that, everybody goes through the same thing, and it's not as difficult as it might feel in the moment when you're struggling on getting through whatever it is that's holding you back.
Yeah, and because they are going to be anonymous, they're able to be so much more open about the practices, while changing names and everything like that. But they're able to really share what's going on without the fear of, I don't know, their employee hearing it or someone, their patient hearing it. Like, they're going to be able to be completely vulnerable, which will provide a lot of value in hearing that story.
So if any of you are listening and want to be on Practice Underwater to talk about your office, we're going to have instructions in the show notes of every episode on how to get on the show. So you just email, we have an email, and then you send an email, and then we'll go ahead and go from there. So I want to very quickly talk about our experiences with coaching, because I think that our experiences with coaching have really shaped how we coach ultimately, and the benefit and the value that we see in coaching is because we both received it.
Yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, as dentists, you are practicing alone. You're very much isolated, and so many things go on during the day, and you have so many ideas for changes to the office, and how do I do this right, or is this the right time for this and this? And if it's just you there, you're not really attacking it with the best plan. You really need someone in your corner that is going to be an observer and say, hey, this is what I'm seeing, and this is more the direction I would go, or this is the time I would think about something like that. And having that is invaluable. And especially when that person can also be someone who's sat in a dentist chair and has done the things you want to do and has gotten their practice to where you want to get your practice, that's even more valuable, because they know the day-to-day struggles and they've done it before, and they're able to look at your practice from 40,000 feet and say, this is what I'm seeing. You said you wanted to get to this place, but you're acting this way. This doesn't line up. So it's just super valuable to have that in your corner. And I wouldn't practice without someone like that in my corner.
And I think for us, it's just the ability to tell somebody, here are my goals, and this is what I want. And I think the most important thing whenever we all talk is that a lot of times we kind of temper our goals. So we'll say, this is what I think I can accomplish, so I'm going to say that's my goal. But what we really want to get people in the habit of, especially the people we have on the show, is to really get in the mindset of nothing's off the table. You can have anything you want. And what is that? And that'll sometimes scare you, because it might be some really crazy stuff that you don't think is possible, but that's not your job to think something is possible or not. It's your job to be honest with yourself and really tell yourself and declare what it is that you truly want. And then it's up to your coach and whoever's helping you to really help you get there.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that comes from just a fear of not hitting the goals. So it's like a weight loss goal. You want to make it manageable because you're afraid of not hitting it and feeling like a failure. And that's a tough pattern to fall into, because it's going to really hinder where you're going to put your own glass ceiling on your results instead of, really shooting for what you really want. Like George says, nothing off the table. What do you really want to accomplish? And that's something that through a coach, you can get worked out of you. A coach is going to call you out for setting a small goal. I know I do with my clients that, listen, the practice was doing 800 when you bought it, and now your goal is to do 850. That's a small goal. And that can be only really reflected by having a coach and having someone in your corner that's going to, be willing to be that person in your life that calls you out.
Yeah, and I think it's up to you, the person, to really be honest and let us know what it is that you want. And then it's up to us to really get you the path there. And the way that we do that, so we both had coaches, and we both really, really believe in that whole concept and philosophy. And so when we set out to create shared practices coaching, we really wanted to be about mindset and metrics. And really for us, if you guys know anything about me, you'll know that I just love numbers, data, and metrics. For me, I'm a very objective person. So, but you have to marry the two. We can't be all metrics. You can't just look at a spreadsheet or, in our case, practice by numbers dashboard and really get anything out of that, because at the end of the day, what the dashboard tells you to do might not be something you're willing, able, or at this time have the proper mindset to accomplish. And so, Matt, can you think of an example of working with somebody, or maybe a situation of your own, that you had to realize that something was a decision that you were unable to make on your own?
Well, I just think I know early on in my practice, I noticed one of my metrics that was very poor was hygiene reappointment. Most people say 80, 90%, upwards to 100, you should be at. I was at 40. So I knew we were losing patients out the back door, right off the bat. So I made it a mission of mine to improve that number. And one of the ways I did that was telling the hygienist to book patients for themselves for the next recall. What I didn't expect was what that would happen was that was met with immediate resistance. I was told that we tried that before and it didn't work, from the hygienist and from the manager. Like, it won't work. Just don't bother. And going in that with the right mindset, I would have been really crushed with that. I would have been like, oh, well, they've been working in dentistry for 30 years, each of them, so they must know this does not work. So it's a bad idea. Like, I guess, I'm a new owner. I guess they just know better than I do. But through reflections from my coach and through discussions, I was able to realize that was just their stuff getting in their way. That was their scarcity. That wasn't mine. So just further gave me confidence that, this is an important thing, and that maybe I just didn't approach it with the right words, with the right headspace, and something I said or did kind of turned them off. So just kind of that reflection about that, just that interaction was something that was made possible by having a coach.
And for me, one example I can think of is, if you think about my early stages in ownership, I'm a brand new dentist in an office with 2 hygienists. And the idea of checking for 2 hygienists was probably the most overwhelming and annoying thing as part of my day. And so, there was times of the day where I was by myself with those 2 hygienists and I had to do a lot of exams. And it felt like it was nonstop. And one of the things I put on my intake form was that I was unsure if I would be able to, when my seller retired, check 2 hygienists by myself. Because that was one of my initial plans, was that my seller would retire and I would become a solo doc with 2 hygienists. And, I think one thing you'll hear from me, pretty much every person I talk to, if they are a solo dentist with 1 hygienist, I'm going to tell you to get a second one. I mean, you will
You're
never...
You're talking to one here, George.
I know. And what have I told you, Matt? So, but one of the things that... So, anyway, we hooked my practice up to practice by numbers. And a couple of things that you'll see in our dashboard, and we talk about it in the next episode, is, you look at my percentage of my patients that were current on their recare, the percentage of my patients that have been lost in the last 12 months. And if you look at all these things, our back door was wide open. But our hygienists were booked solid, where we couldn't get a new patient in for like a month. So all of these things made me realize, oh crap, we need a 3rd hygienist. But my mindset at the time had been so anti to the idea of growing the practice, and getting a 3rd seemed like something I would never want to do.
And don't you think, George, that if someone was just a dentist without that practice metric software, they wouldn't have thought your office was ready for a 3rd hygienist?
Yeah, I remember I messaged a buddy of mine. I said, we're getting a 3rd hygienist. And, I was asking him a question about it. And he said, well, how do you know you need a 3rd hygienist? And I think that's one of the most common things I need is, how do you know you're ready? How do you know you're ready? And every dentist is terrified of openings in hygiene. And they don't want their highest paid employees sitting there without anything to do. So they hold themselves back and hold their practices back by not expanding hygiene enough. And that's really going to kill you in the long run.
And that's where your mindset trumps, most people's, just to be honest. I mean, and now that 3rd hygienist is busy and you're almost ready for a 4th.
Long overdue on the 4th.
It's incredible. Yeah. That was months ago.
Yeah. So, but going back to that mindset first, it's also, so if I didn't
let's just say I had the metrics and I was able to recognize I need a third hygienist. I still have this huge mental block because I'm not even able to check 2 comfortably. I'm a brand new dentist. So I would, without a coach, would have never, ever hired a third, let alone in a month hired a third. From the time that we recognized that, I had a third hygienist in there in like 3 weeks. And so it was just that ability to kind of get over that mental hurdle that I had of I cannot check for 2 hygienists, let alone 3. And now I check for 3 all the time, and I'm about to check for 4, and it just seems fine. Yeah. And but if you asked me a year ago if that would have been possible, I would have said no. And I think it's that mindset of that's not possible that holds you back from doing the correct decisions that ultimately grow your practice.
Yeah. And I think too, it's not the changes you make to your office that don't impact the staff, like hiring a marketing company or, doing mailers or, signing up for Swell or a different service. It's the changes that impact the staff, and the way you present them is the real difficulty in making the changes to your office that you want to make. Like every dentist, if they could, they pretty much know how to get to a successful practice and what the different knobs they need to turn. But being able to present that to a staff with their own biases, their own scarcities, their own, stuck in the way of doing things, and how you get them to get on board with that, that's the real difficulty of a dentist, I think.
Yeah, and I think to add to that, the patience. Because if you think about it, I'm a brand new acquisition. I've been in this place for like a month, as an owner, and a lot of patients haven't met me. So the idea of having them meet a new hygienist and then have them meet a new dentist would definitely scare a lot of people. And, they would definitely stick with the comfortable thing of having the existing hygienist introduce them to all of the patients before they even think about getting an additional hygienist. That's
an important word you said there, comfortable. I mean, it's so easy to fall into that, into what's comfortable, what's safe, what's easy. And that's how you get comfortable, easy, safe results. That's all you'll get from that mindset. If you want to expand where you want to go, you need to expand your comfort level. You need to have those uncomfortable conversations with staff. You need to have those uncomfortable conversations with patients. That's going to get you from the average to the above average to the extraordinary.
And I think when you are, so people always ask me, am I going to have a coach forever? And I think, for me, I think when you're able to recognize the uncomfortable conversation you have to have, or the uncomfortable decision you have to make, and are able to make that on your own, then that's when you've kind of graduated the ability to, that's when you're a leader, enough of a leader to really be on your own. And that doesn't come easy. I mean, the idea of, I still have, kind of wrench in my stomach about certain decisions that I know I have to make. And you just kind of you have to get the courage and the ability to know that that's the right thing, regardless of an immediate reaction or whatever it is that you're afraid of.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's like, are you the kind of person that sees someone doing something the incorrect way and is able to, gently call that out in the moment or in the short near future? Or is that something you're going to sit on, let fester, and then all of a sudden you blow up over something small because you've never addressed these little things that have irked you for the last several weeks? When you get to that point where you're able to, really be with people, the whole time you're in the office, rather than just bottling things up, is like George said, is when, you've reached a level of leadership that, to be quite honest, most dentists don't reach.
It's funny. So Justin, our coach, great leader. And that's one of the things that I think he really helped us both with, is being a strong leader with your staff. And I think one of my initial problems is wanting to be everybody's friend. I didn't embrace the fact that I'm the boss. And it's really hard to, as a new dentist who's a lot younger than my entire team, it felt very uncomfortable to really sit in the fact that I'm the boss and what I say goes. And I don't want to be like that. I don't want to be macho, a-hole boss. But at the same time, I definitely need to be in control and need to be, kind of solid in what I say. And so, if you think of an example of, fluoride is a good example. So we introduced adult fluoride in our office, and if I have a hygienist who's not doing adult fluoride, then if I don't say anything, because it's uncomfortable to tell somebody that they're not doing or they're not offering fluoride to all their patients, and that's a problem, then I'm accepting a poor performing fluoride department. And if you think about the impact financially on you over the next 20, 30 years, however long you're going to practice, for not accepting what is excellent results, that's really going to, that's costing nobody but you and your patients. And that's just you not wanting to have an uncomfortable conversation. That's you thinking, oh, it'll turn around. She'll come around. Just give it time. Instead of knowing that I need to have that uncomfortable conversation. And the more you have those conversations, the better you get at them, the more comfortable they get, and the less they bother you. But I think it's just the ability to really sit in that discomfort that comes with those conversations that leads to that growth. And, if you hear about people on the show that have had coaching and have gotten great results, it's because they've been able to get through their discomfort and get to their goals. And it's really, really hard to do because for everybody, stuff comes in the way that is in our minds and it holds us back. And we don't realize it until we have somebody telling us, you're holding yourself back for this reason. You're not having that conversation. And, I could go through a lot of examples, but I think my team would appreciate that I don't.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. No one trains us how to deal with that stomach feeling you get, when you need to, like, say you need to fire someone, or you need to, even just something small, just let them know that they're doing their job not so perfectly. That stomach feeling where you just tighten there, like, that's tough to get over. And it's just like a muscle. It's like you're not going to be able to get over until you do it a bunch. You come desensitized to it. You've built that muscle, and now it's not a big deal when you do it anymore. And I think for me, like, the only way I'm able to make like big changes like that is to kind of tie it to an identity. So I've identified myself as a leader who's going to run an extraordinary practice. And, that's the kind of lens I see my day through. If I see something that I know I need to address, I think about, would a leader who's going to run an extraordinary practice, wouldn't he address that? So if I don't address that, then I'm a fraud. And that's kind of how I hold myself to that standard. Like, you said you were a leader. What, are you just lying to yourself? No, a leader does this, so you have to do it. And that's kind of how I get my, and we all fall short, and we all kind of, nobody's perfect with this stuff, but this is how one way I kind of hold myself in check and hold myself to that higher standard and try to not get in my own way as much as I can.
Yeah. And I think the part that we really want to show with this whole segment of our show is that everybody's human. And I think a lot of times it's really easy to look at people on air who are doing well or talking in a position of authority and assume that they're not human and they have some innate quality or there's something special about them that I can't have. And the reality is that all of us are regular people, and some people have pushed through more discomfort and have had better mindsets than others. And that really is what it is at the end of the day.
Yeah. And it's an extraordinary career in that it doesn't take, what's the Howard Ferran quote you love, George, that you're starting with?
So what do you call a dentist who does one or two things right? And you call them a millionaire. And that did I talk about that recently? Because that quote, I was at dinner the other day with a couple of buddies, and they were talking about that same quote. And yeah, it totally changed my life. Just hearing that all you have to do are a few things really well to do incredibly well in this profession. It
just shows you like what a gift this profession really is. That there's a low margin for doing really well. And if you're one that works on yourself and wants to do even better than that, is willing to put in, willing to be uncomfortable, willing to do some self-looking and self-growth, then honestly, the sky's the limit. And it's really incredible that we're in that kind of career. And I think we all should be thankful for that.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times on social media, you'll hear about such a negative environment around this profession, the debt, all of the things, the insurance reimbursements, whatever people complain about all the time. But the reality is that I think if you compare us to average Americans, we're incredibly fortunate. And, I think we hold ourselves back more than we think. And, those environments don't really help at all with our mindsets.
Yeah. And, one of the things this podcast is going to do is kind of shed light on that a little bit with some people. And that's going to allow the listeners to shed light on that for themselves and say, hey, how is the problems that this person is showing up with this in this episode. How is that showing up in my life? Maybe I'm acting in a similar way, and that allows for some self-reflection and hopefully some growth. So that's kind of the intent for this program, is for each listener to kind of get something out of it for their own lives and their own practices.
Yep. And then we have, so I think, the Shared Practices podcast, the traditional, so the Friday releases that we normally have, the seasons, are very, very structured. And so I think we want to give ourselves a little bit of freedom to break out of that structure with, wild card episodes here and there on either following up with people that we've had on the show before, or doing, I think, like we call it a wellness hour, or some sort of mental health awareness episode, talking about a lot of the mental health impact in dentistry, because Matt and I are both really, really big on that. And so, Matt, can you talk a little bit about, your take on the role of mental health in dentistry?
Yeah, I mean, everyone is gonna bring up that the suicide fact that we've all heard a million times, but it does kind of shed light on, this. It's a tough profession. Like I said, we are grateful for being in it, but at the same day to day, this is a tough profession. It's tough on our bodies, which impacts our well-being, from our ears to our backs, to our necks, to our eyes, all those kind of things deteriorate at a faster rate because of the positions we're putting our bodies in. And that's kind of one part of our wellness we'll look into. We'll talk to chiropractors. We'll talk to, body healers. We'll talk to people that, to know about how the body works and how the positions we're putting in can be detrimental, and how we can, work to improve that. And then the mental health aspect of it, it's a stressful career. It can be lonely. You're dealing with people in pain. Sometimes you're dealing with angry people. Sometimes you're dealing with angry staff. You can internalize a lot of that and get in some nasty habits, from drinking, drugs, gambling. It can be a tough career, and we want to shed light on some of those issues that we know a lot of dentists are going through that probably aren't talked about so much. Again, just to have everyone shed light on it, and so we can get it out in the open and talk about it, to know that, hey, if you're going through these things, there's some ways to reach out to different people that can help, and you're not alone in what you're going through. This is a common thing you're going through.
And I think I guess the stuff that I really care about and want to talk about as well is the feelings of inadequacy that come up a lot, especially when you hear success stories. Those feelings of, feeling mediocre about your results, or, I guess it's just your ability to fully understand what you want. And I think a lot of people don't allow themselves to fully feel their desires and what they want in life. And it can just lead to this sort of ladder-like mentality where you feel like, the path to getting to be a dentist is so linear. It's so many stairs up a ladder. And you get in that ladder mindset of, I go up the next rung. I go to undergrad, I go to dental school, I maybe do a residency, then I get an associateship, and then I might then I might become owner. And then you might reach a level of success, and you're thinking, now what? And I think that mentality of, life will be better when I do this. And I think that's something that is really, really dangerous, and is very prevalent. And, you talk about all these people about early retirement and all that stuff. I think that's another example of, life will be better when I'm retired, but the reality is, if life is not good now, it's probably not going to be good then. And I think we really need to, as dentists, just be happy with where we're at, have goals, but not tell ourselves things will be better when I accomplish my goals.
Yeah, and that's an easy pattern to fall into, especially like you said, with the linear trajectory of becoming a dentist. I'll be happier when I'm at a dental school, and then I'll be happier when I'm at a residency. I'll be happy when I'm an owner. As someone who's done that path and has a lot of times told myself those things, it doesn't make you any happier being in another position just because you're in that position. You're still the same person. You're still bringing the same being to those places in your life, that if you don't do the self-work to kind of fall out of that pattern, you're going to be just as unhappy as an owner as you were in dental school. So shedding light on that and knowing that this is a pattern people can fall into is super important.
And I think my favorite thing to say whenever I talk to people is, ask me how I know, because at the end of the day, we don't know this stuff from reading about it. We know this stuff from going through it. I sort of reached a point in my practice where I was like, oh crap. Like if you were to like think about George in undergrad of college, and I were to say, what do I define success as? If I'm being totally frank, I was probably there. But I didn't feel successful, and I didn't feel as happy as I thought I would be. And that's what sort of led me down this path of trying to figure out, well, why not? And I feel like that's where I really discovered that mentally I was very unhealthy. And I was sort of, once you get to the rung of the ladder, once you get to the top, it doesn't end. You just, in your mind, have already built the next 4 or 5 steps. And life is just this progression that you should always be searching and trying to do things you want and have challenges. And so you're never going to get to the top of the ladder. And if so you don't enjoy the climb, then you're just never really going to be truly happy. And time will just go by and you will so I think for me, it took getting to a spot and recognizing that, man, I'm here, but I don't feel like I'm here. And, I think if anything, we want to be really honest on this show. And so, obviously I don't love saying that. I don't like talking about that on air to thousands of people. But the reality is that my guess is a lot of you are going through the same thing. And we really want a show that's impactful, that's going to change people's lives. And I think if you could say anything about the Shared Practices podcast to date, it's that we've changed people's lives. We've gotten people into ownership faster. We've had them see the values of ownership. And so how can we, now that we have this segment of our audience that's in ownership and people that are going to be owners in the future, how can we impact owners' lives? And I think that's really where Practice Underwater comes in, is identifying your struggles, being brutally honest about mindsets, difficulties, feelings that everybody has, inadequacy, all that stuff that comes up, and how to get through it, how to get past it, and how to ultimately the whole goal is to be happy, right? I mean, I would assume that's everybody's goal.
That's my goal too, George. And I will just say, you and Richard did change my own life. So I'm one of those people, test case for you, you're a life changer.
So, I mean, I guess when we talk about, the growth that we've had, I think a lot of it comes from just, I guess it's just the ability to A, recognize things, and B, not to get sucked into that idea that if I do Invisalign really, really well, it's going to explode my practice. I think that's for me what metrics have really changed about my view of things is I can sort of see what kind of impact Invisalign would have. And if that's where I want to go, then great. But most likely, that's not the answer to the question, is a procedure, a skill set, adding something, marketing differently. It's all about the way your practice operates and runs. And so that for me is really, I think, what we hope to really show with Practice Underwater on top of the mindset.
Yeah, I mean, getting a new course, learning a new skill, buying a new service, those things are easy. Spending money on that kind of thing and thinking about those things, that's easy. That's easy to do. But really getting down to, as you said, how is my practice running at the core of it, that's harder. And that's going to take more time and effort than just, what you might think might be a magic bullet. So yeah, a lot of times clients will come with that kind of magic bullet request. Well, should I take this implant course before their ship is stable? They got a leaky ship and then they want to add more cargo to it. And well, that's just going to make a ship sink faster. It's really getting back to patching that main hole of your ship and getting back to neutral. And then, okay, now what do we think? Can we add on some other procedures?
And I the reason we're so big on metrics is, I kind of view them as Xrays, and that's the analogy I'll always use because I think it's just very relatable to us. But I always felt like, before I really understood my metrics, I always felt like I was a patient in pain. And I sort of knew where it was, but I could never really identify what the problem was. And so I'd go to the dentist and sort of describe, when I bite down, it hurts, sometimes with cold water, sometimes with hot water, and it's on this tooth, and it'd be like a dentist trying to diagnose that without any X-rays. And at the end of the day, you're not really going to see anything, and we're not really going to try to solve the problem. And so I always felt like something just didn't feel right, but I could never really know why. And then once I learned why, then I can sort of understand why my practice is where it is and what I have to do to get it to where I want it to be. And so, a really great example is, on our coaching calls, we have our clients' practice by numbers information, and we go through it before the call. And so we went through the dashboard, and I noticed, really big issue in their practice. And, I'm on the call, and, clients talking about how, an added procedure is really going to make the practice go to that level where they want it to. But really what I saw was that the dentist was doing very few exams, and they had a lack of stability in their hygiene department. And so it made it feel like very big case dependent. And so he just kind of felt like it felt off, but he couldn't really put his finger on why. And so, if I had not looked at his metrics and understood what I was looking at, then we would have never known to focus on his hygiene department. We would have just been talking about that procedure that he could add, or thinking about, upping his diagnosis or something. But at the end of the day, his diagnosis was fantastic. It was the patient flow that was the problem. And so it's just the ability to really understand what is the true problem, because a lot of times if you're sucked in the situation that you're in, it's really not what you think it is.
Yeah, I mean, like a coach of a basketball team, you would never just coach based on your feel of the players and how everyone looks that day, or what's everyone's condition like. No, you would look at film and analytics and numbers, and you would research these things and study them. And then, okay, we have a plan for this game. Now let's attack this game a certain way. Just like with metrics, like you wouldn't run your practice without knowing the important numbers. And I think it's important, George, that we tease kind of what we have coming in our next episode. So George alluded to it, that Rohit Garg, the founder of Practice by Numbers, is going to sit down with us, and we're going to go over what we have collectively found to be, say, the 15, 20 most important metrics in a dental practice, and how we have created a custom dashboard for shared practices to show these metrics in a certain way. So when a client comes on to practice underwater, we're going to get into their software, and we're going to see all their numbers on this custom dashboard. So we're able to see what's going well, where they're falling short. And I will say too, Rohit's wife has 3 dental practices. So he is, aside from designing the software, he knows very intimately what is important in a dental office as well. So it's going to be a super jam-packed episode, and something that's going to bring a lot of value to our listeners.
Yeah, so I think the dashboard is really what is our, I think it's our best quality. If we had to, what makes us really, really good at being able to pinpoint that stuff, it's our ability to really have an FMX that we understand. And so, we went through my office for a few hours with Rohit, and yeah, I would consider myself a practice by numbers super user. I'm definitely very familiar with the software. I've definitely kind of nerded out on it for a year. And so, for having spent all that time doing it, but sitting down with the founder of the company, with me, you, and him, and going through my office as our example, I learned a lot of things that I could do a lot better, and I wasn't expecting to. And so that was really eye-opening for us. And then also just the amount of information that can be gleaned from it is really remarkable. And so I'm really, really excited about our dashboard. We go through, I think if you really had to highlight the sections of it, it's really long, and it's very crowded and busy. And that's what we want. We don't want it to feel like you could look at it for the first time and understand what you're looking at, because the reality is it's not that simple. And so, we look a lot of, doctor production stuff. So treatment plan sizes, the percentage of patients where you're diagnosing things, your case acceptance, your treatment acceptance, all of those things are looked at. And then we'll look at your hygiene department, your retention, your patient flow, your new patient flow, and we'll look at your hygiene production, and then we'll really settle on your admin department. So your front desk, your collections, your, getting patients back in after they've canceled appointments, all that stuff. And so if we look at that and we compare your practice to all the other practices that they have on the software, then we can really see, what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses. And based on your strengths and weaknesses, if you tell me your goal is X, and I see that you have strengths and weaknesses, but what is going to keep you from reaching your goal? And those are the things that we need to focus on. If I had, some people, like a value-added practice is a good example. If I have somebody who has a value-added practice, like 9 ops, they just have 1 hygienist, and they say, I want to have 2 or 3 dentists in here and have a really big group practice one day, then, that totally changes what metrics are most important to that person versus if you're just a solo doc and you already have 2 hygienists and you have no intention of growing your patient base anymore, then, you need a whole different set of things that you're focusing on to get you to your goals. And so I think it's really marrying the dentist goals, their metrics at their current office and understanding them with their mindset and being able to navigate the 3 to really get them to where they want to go.
It's just such an advantage to have in your corner. If you think about like most dentists, I would venture to guess that they look at production collections, new patients, maybe 1 or 2 other things. And now you have this affordable software that you can log on, instantly see every number about your practice you could ever want, all right there. That is such an advantage. You're playing by different rules than everyone else in your area if you have these things, and that's why it's just such a no-brainer. And I will credit George for turning me on to this, because before I actually even met George or spoke to him, he FaceTimed me and showed me very excitedly all through this software and how it was working in his office. And he was the reason I bought it. So thank you, George.
Yeah, I definitely have a lot of passion for it. And I think that really, I hope that comes through to our audience. And, it definitely came through to you that day. Yeah, but Matt just called me up and I just kind of showed him kind of the back behind the scenes of what it is. And it's a big part of my practice now. I couldn't switch to a different service because at the end of the day, my staff would not like me because they actually use Practice by Numbers a lot and they love the software. And it's a part of our office for sure.
Yeah, and we used it too. I got my front desk call and recall based off it. I got my hygienist tracking their stats through it. So I love it.
So now just to kind of recap things. So take somebody through a typical practice underwater. If you're interested in being on the show, or if you're a listener, what is the kind of typical sequence of how this is going to work?
So you're going to email our Gmail. I think it's going to be practiceunderwater@gmail.com. Tell us a little bit about your practice. We'll most likely have an intake form for you to fill out, but you're going to tell us about the practice, kind of where you want to go. We really want to hear about your goals for the practice, where your vision for where you're trying to go, and then talk about kind of where you're falling short, maybe how you're getting in your own way, how the practice isn't performing the way you want it to, and then what exactly you want to get out of this coaching. It's a little different because it's kind of very much condensed coaching. George and I coach clients. We coach for a year. This is, a couple calls. So it is not to replicate actual dental coaching. It's just to kind of give a little snapshot about where they're at and some tips and tools for how to get where they're going. So we really want to get clear on where it is you want to go with this practice and then how it's fallen short. And once through that, we will have a call with this client, either me or George, and then George and I will do a recap call or a recap episode and talk about, the things we saw and, the suggestions were made and how the practice could get to where the client wants to go.
I think that's a great synopsis. And, I think the thing is a really emphasis on the word snapshot. We're looking at a snapshot dashboard. So, in one moment of time, where are they at? And based on where they want to go, how do they get there? And I think it's going to be really fun because, again, it's really, really based on honesty. We have to make everybody on this anonymous, or else you're going to wonder, why did they want to be anonymous but not this person? And ultimately we don't want anybody bragging. That's not going to do anything for anybody. And we don't want anybody lying or not making it seem as bad or as trying to sugarcoat what it is, unless they're just doing it for other reasons, which I could totally understand. But we really just want them to get plugged into our dashboard, let us see and look and see what we see, and then get them on, talk to them about their goals. And I think one of the things that we haven't done any of these yet, so this is totally us just before we ever do it and learn the pitfalls and this whole idea. I think one of the things we're going to have a really hard time doing is having people be really honest about what they want, because a lot of people aren't honest with themselves. They'll say, if my practice hits this number, I'm just going to be elated and that's it. And then they're going to hit that number and they're going to want more, and I think it's just getting people to declare what their goal is and be 100% honest, because it might sound crazy and they might not want to sound crazy, but that's really what we want to hear, is that crazy out of this world goal that if you could have anything you want in life, what is it?
Yeah, we want to hear the goal that like you're afraid to even admit to your spouse. Like I want to work 2 days a week, and I'm currently working 5. Like something that's just gonna that would make you the most happy, or I don't want to put it that way. Kind of just if like Joshua said, if nothing's off the table, what would you want?
Yeah, and I remember I was actually a podcast episode with Justin, my coach, and he said that, and he said, just got that idea in my head. Nothing off the table. You can have anything you want in life, and I really feel like that is the foundation for what we really want to start with. Because that changes. When I started, I thought that I wanted to be a super productive solo dentist and just have an office and just, really, really kill it in one place, kind of like what you do, Matt. And
it ain't worth it.
Yeah, but
it's worth it.
At the end of the day, what I realized is I really enjoy working with other dentists, and I really enjoy a bigger team, and I actually don't really like being so clinically tied to the office. And so every time I've been really honest with myself and I say, nothing's off the table, I can have anything I want in life, I find myself clinically working less and less to the point where I have to do things that make me uncomfortable to still make a good income, but, do it differently. And that's led me down 2 paths. One, definitely making less money than I could, but the second is being much happier. And I think that's the whole goal, is to do what you want to be much happier as a person, as a dentist. And every time I've made the trade-off of doing the less greedy thing, but the thing that I feel nothing off the table, that's what I want, I've been incredibly happy with the decision. And it's almost been like so much easier to make that decision the next time. And so I'm definitely, my career has been a lot of that reflection and kind of pivoting based on what that tells me. And it might look unstable, but the reality is it's honest. And I think I would implore everybody here to, if you're going to leave this episode and do one thing, get a notepad and just be honest with yourself for 10 minutes. Nothing off the table. You can have anything you want in life. What is it? And I think you'll be very surprised that anything is possible. Anything is possible. Everybody's accomplished everything almost. And especially in dentistry. I mean, I can't think of anything that's like unaccomplishable. So, you can definitely have whatever it is that you want. Just be honest with yourself. Because if you're not, and you don't even declare what it is you want, I guarantee you won't get it.
Yeah. And don't focus on whether you think you can get these things or not. Like that's not what is important in this. It's just like George said, be honest with yourself that this is what I really want. Under all the shit, this is it. This is what I want. And there's no judgment if you don't get there, but just declaring that will be such a powerful exercise for you.
I couldn't agree more. And, Matt just said shit. And, that was one thing I wanted to mention in this. Matt and I got some sailor's tongues here, and we definitely like to let it fly on air. And Richard likes to bleep us out. So I'm going to ask him kindly on our segment of the show to let it stay. We'll see what happens. If these are bleeped out, then you'll know what happened with that conversation.
George, this is 2 versus 1. We're all partners here. We, of course, win out. So we will be swearing intermittently, when needed for effect.
All right, guys. So just going back to a more serious note, just get out a pen and paper. Nothing's off the table. You can have anything you want in life. And what is that? And I think what you'll find is I wouldn't take what you write literally. I would try to extract what is it about what I write that really tells me something. If it's I don't want to work anymore clinically, maybe you need to figure out why. Is it because you want more freedom? Is it because there's something you're unable to do because you practice clinically? And then sort of try to maybe tailor your practice towards those things as opposed to just trying to let go of the handpiece entirely. I think that's the real benefit of the exercise, is trying to figure out from what I wrote, what does it mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And being super honest with yourself and just, and you may even come up with something you didn't even thought you wanted. And it just kind of spilled out of you. And you're like, wow, that's actually something that seems interesting to me. So try it out.
Yep. And one last thing, I think if I were to look at my situation a year ago, going into an acquisition, I was worried, am I going to be able to keep up the level of productivity and the size of the practice that I'm acquiring as a new grad? That was like my number one biggest concern. And, I'm sitting here today, having grown it substantially, I would think, It's funny because I don't think I've grown it substantially, but then when I tell people that we've grown more than 50%, they sort of like give me, kind of this look like, are you serious? But, I think that goes back to just kind of your expectations and making sure that you also appreciate the fact that you acknowledge that, whatever you've accomplished to date is something. And you sort of like, if you go hiking, you turn around every once in a while and look at how far you've come, because I think it takes that appreciation for what you've done. I mean, even if you don't feel like you've done anything, I bet you could be proud of things that you've done. And I think it's really important to turn around and see how far you've come and really appreciate where you're at.
It's like I say to you all the time, George, you got to reward yourself for these things. We hold ourselves to such a high standard that we think these things are normal and that they shouldn't be acknowledged. No, like you're doing incredible things. You need to reward yourself for that, because it's going to give you so much more satisfaction and so much more gratitude for what you've accomplished and where you're at in your life so early in your career. That's super important. Reward yourself, however small it is. Yeah,
that is something Matt and I both, I like that we have that type of relationship where we can both kind of call each other out on stuff that we're not doing. Like I'm trying to encourage Matt to get more and more hygiene in his office, and he's trying to encourage me to reward myself for my small accomplishments that I don't think are anything. So
they're not small. Go ahead.
That's what she said. All right. Well, I'm really, really excited for the next episode, and really, really excited to talk about the dashboard in more depth. And it's probably going to be one of those that you're going to be driving and just be thinking like, what are they talking about? But I think it'll be kind of a nice place, like an index where you can go back and, hear about each metric as we talk about them on the show. And I just think it's a necessary thing that we have to do. We got to go through each one in depth. So I'm looking forward to that. Thanks, Matt. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you, George. I'm happy to be a podcaster. I want to see how I sound at 2x speed. It's going to be exciting. Thanks, everyone, for listening.
All right. Bye, guys.